Subscribe now to never miss thrilling stories full of romance, suspense, and unexpected twists. Hit that button and join our story-loving family. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Emily realized that Max, her mischievous little terrier, had slipped out of the apartment without her noticing. She had been rushing to prepare for an important video call, juggling emails and coffee, when the tiny paw prints led straight to the building's lobby. Panic rose in her chest as she scanned the crowded street through the glass doors, hoping to catch a glimpse of his familiar brown fur. Max was fast, stubborn, and notorious for escaping whenever he sensed adventure. Today, of all days, he had chosen to vanish. Emily sprinted downstairs, umbrella in hand, dodging pedestrians and splashing through puddles. Her mind raced with worry, imagining him lost somewhere in the busy city. She called his name, her voice almost drowned by the honking traffic. But Max had disappeared. Her heart sank, and a sense of urgency drove her forward. She followed a trail of tiny footprints that somehow led her toward the luxury high-rise building across the street. She knew the place by reputation. Residents whispered about the mysterious tenants, the penthouse suites, and the people who rarely mingled with the outside world. And now, with Max possibly inside, she had no choice but to enter. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the grand lobby doors and stepped into the pristine marble interior. Security glanced at her suspiciously, but Emily's pleading eyes and frantic gestures explained enough. "Please, I'm looking for my dog. He ran in here," she called. The guard hesitated but stepped aside, clearly not wanting a scene. Emily dashed into the elevator, praying it would take her up to the top floors quickly. She pressed the button for the penthouse. The rumors said that was where the owner lived, a man whose name she had heard in hushed tones around the neighborhood, Victor Romano, a Mafia boss whose reputation was as sharp as the tailored suits he wore. The elevator hummed upward, and Emily tried to calm herself, rehearsing how she would explain the situation. She never expected what awaited her at the top. The doors opened, revealing a vast penthouse, tastefully decorated yet exuding a quiet, dangerous authority. And there, curled on a luxurious rug near the window, was Max, wagging his tail happily as if nothing had happened. Before Emily could step forward, a deep, commanding voice echoed from the other side of the room. "Looking for someone." Max's tiny bark followed her gaze, and Emily froze. Standing there was a man who seemed to belong in a movie, the kind of presence that could make a room go silent. Dark eyes assessed her quickly, a faint smirk playing on his lips. He was nothing like she had imagined. His reputation said ruthless, but his gaze, at that moment, seemed curious rather than threatening. Emily swallowed hard, her words catching in her throat. That's my dog," she stammered, pointing at Max. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Your dog," he repeated, his voice low but not unkind. Then, almost as if on instinct, he gestured toward a long dining table elegantly set. "Well, if you want him back, you'll have to join us for lunch." Emily blinked in shock. "Lunch? Here, now." Victor's smirk widened. "You don't get Max otherwise." And just like that, her ordinary day spiraled into something she could never have imagined. A lunch invitation from a Mafia boss was certainly not on her to-do list. Yet, staring at her little terrier wagging happily, Emily realized she had no choice. She stepped forward, heart pounding, ready to face whatever surprises awaited her inside the penthouse. Emily's heart raced as she followed Victor into the grand dining room, each step echoing softly against the polished hardwood floors. The table was set impeccably, gleaming under the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Crystal glasses caught the light, silver cutlery shone, and the aroma of freshly prepared dishes filled the air, a combination of gourmet spices and homemade warmth that instantly made Emily's stomach rumble despite her nerves. Max trotted beside her, oblivious to the tension, clearly feeling at home among the opulence. Victor gestured toward the chairs, his dark eyes scanning her face to gauge her reaction. Emily hesitated, then carefully lowered herself into the nearest seat, her mind whirling with anxiety and curiosity. As she settled, a woman with an elegant poise approached. "Victor, you've invited a guest." Her voice carried both authority and a soft, almost amused curiosity. Emily quickly realized this must be part of the family. Victor's nod was slight, yet commanding, as if the word alone carried weight. The woman smiled politely at Emily, and Emily returned the gesture, feeling the awkwardness of suddenly being thrown into such an unfamiliar environment. Then, one by one, others appeared, men and women, each with an air of controlled power, laughing quietly among themselves, yet casting fleeting, sharp glances at her. They were all impeccably dressed, and despite the seemingly casual atmosphere, Emily sensed a carefully maintained discipline and hierarchy in the room. Victor took his seat at the head of the table, his presence undeniable. He glanced at Emily, his expression unreadable. "You wanted your dog back," he said casually, as if nothing extraordinary was happening, "so you're part of lunch." Emily tried to suppress a nervous laugh. "I didn't exactly expect to be invited to a Mafia family meal," she admitted, her voice small but steady. Victor's lips curled into a faint smirk, almost imperceptible, as though he enjoyed her candid honesty. Max barked happily, jumping onto her lap, breaking the tension. Emily hugged him tightly, whispering a soft, "You really know how to get me into trouble, don't you?" The meal began, each dish presented with a deliberate care that reflected Victor's meticulous attention to detail. Conversation flowed around her, but she struggled to participate. Every word she tried to say was measured, each glance she received from the family members felt like an unspoken test. Yet, amid the tension, she noticed subtle gestures of warmth, small smiles exchanged between Victor and his sister, a quiet joke shared across the table that didn't include her but made her feel like she was witnessing something intimate, something human beneath the intimidating surface. Victor seemed to notice her discomfort and leaned slightly toward her. "Relax," he said softly, though his tone carried a weight that made her shiver in anticipation. "They're curious, yes, but they don't bite." Emily forced herself to nod, attempting to mirror the calmness he exuded. She took a cautious sip of water and glanced around the room. One of the younger men, possibly in his 20s, watched her with faint amusement, like someone observing a new recruit. Another woman, older and more composed, offered a polite nod. Emily realized that while they may appear intimidating, there was a rhythm to their interactions, an unspoken code that dictated their behavior, a blend of power, respect, and subtle protection. It was both fascinating and frightening. As lunch progressed, Victor asked Emily questions, innocuous at first, about her work and daily life, but gradually they became slightly more personal. She felt an odd tension in answering, aware that each word might be weighed and stored in memory. Yet, there was also a sense of curiosity from him, a spark that hinted he wasn't merely assessing her for frivolous reasons. Max, ever the catalyst, moved freely between the table and Emily's lap, drawing smiles and soft chuckles even from the most stoic family members. It was through him that Emily found a small window of connection, a bridge between the ordinary world she knew and this extraordinary world she had stumbled into. Victor's sister, who introduced herself as Isabella, finally leaned closer and whispered something in Italian. Emily didn't understand the words, but the tone carried a softness that contrasted sharply with the sharp edges of the environment. Victor translated with a brief smile, "She's asking if Max likes the food. Apparently, she thinks even pets deserve a taste of luxury." Emily laughed, the sound almost foreign in the grandeur of the room, and she felt a flicker of warmth toward this strange family. It was unusual, yet oddly comforting, to witness their subtleties, their moments of genuine humor amidst an otherwise serious and calculated atmosphere. Suddenly, a loud chime echoed from the penthouse, drawing everyone's attention. Victor's expression shifted ever so slightly, a shadow crossing his features. He excused himself, leaving Emily momentarily alone with Max, who seemed perfectly content sprawled across her lap. The family's chatter continued, but Emily's mind was racing. The unexpected intrusion of a call, the subtle tension in Victor's demeanor, something was always happening behind the polished exterior. It was both thrilling and terrifying. She realized that this wasn't merely a lunch, it was a carefully orchestrated dance, a glimpse into a world she had never imagined, one where power, influence, and unexpected kindness could coexist in the same room. Victor returned after a few minutes, a slight smile back on his face, but his eyes held that faint shadow of seriousness. "Emergency handled," he said casually, yet Emily sensed the underlying gravity. He turned his attention back to her, a subtle challenge in his gaze. "I hope you understand," he began, "that lunch is more than just a meal. It's a way of seeing who you are, how you move, how you react." Emily nodded, her pulse quickening. She wasn't entirely sure if she wanted to understand completely, yet a part of her was undeniably intrigued. There was a rhythm to Victor, a magnetic pull she couldn't deny, and it both excited and unnerved her. By the end of the meal, Emily felt exhausted yet strangely exhilarated. Max had his fill of scraps and attention, and she had survived a close encounter with an unexpectedly formidable yet fascinating family. Victor's gaze lingered on her longer than necessary as she rose to leave, a subtle acknowledgement of the unexpected connection formed over a simple, yet extraordinary, lunch. As the elevator doors closed, Emily realized that her ordinary afternoon had transformed into something surreal, something that promised far more than she could anticipate. She clutched Max tightly, whispering softly, "What have you gotten us into, little guy?" And somewhere deep inside, she knew that this encounter was only the beginning. Emily stepped out of the elevator, Max trotting happily beside her, still blissfully unaware of the unusual circumstances that had brought them into Victor Romano's world. The city outside was draped in twilight, the streets glistening from the earlier rain, reflections of neon signs dancing across puddles. She exhaled deeply, attempting to shake off the lingering tension from the lunch. Her encounter with Victor and his family had left her both exhilarated and unnerved. There was a magnetic pull about him, calm, commanding, yet tinged with mystery, and she couldn't stop thinking about his dark, penetrating eyes. Walking down the steps of the penthouse lobby, Emily noticed the way the building seemed alive with subtle security measures she had never considered before, cameras hidden in plain sight, guards subtly positioned, eyes always scanning. A small thrill ran through her. This was a world completely different from her own, structured yet unpredictable, dangerous yet strangely fascinating. She reached the street, glancing at Max, who yipped happily, unaware of the tension that had accompanied their lunch. As Emily started toward the taxi stand, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, frowning at the unknown number. It was Victor. Her heart skipped a beat. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen, before finally answering. "Hello," she said cautiously. "Emily," his voice was smooth, calm, yet carried that undeniable authority that had made her pulse quicken during lunch. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I wanted to check if you and Max made it home safely." Emily swallowed, a mixture of curiosity and nervousness washing over her. "Yes, we did. Max is fine. He's probably exhausted from all the excitement." There was a pause on the other side, and then he said, almost conversationally, "Good. I wanted to make sure he's safe. I can't have him wandering into dangerous situations." The underlying tone was not threatening, but protective, as if he had taken responsibility for a small piece of her world without permission, and she found herself oddly touched. "Thank you," she murmured. She wasn't sure why, but there was a warmth in that simple phrase, one that seemed to acknowledge more than just concern for Max. Victor's voice softened, almost imperceptibly. "If you're free tomorrow evening, I'd like to see you again. Perhaps a walk in the park with Max. It would be less formal than today's lunch." Emily blinked, surprise mingling with excitement. I think that would be nice." He ended the call with a brief, "Good night," leaving Emily standing on the wet street, her mind spinning. She couldn't help but smile, thinking about the contrast between the fear and intrigue she had felt in the penthouse and this unexpected invitation for something ordinary, a walk in the park. Yet, somehow, with Victor, even ordinary things seemed charged with meaning. The next evening arrived faster than she anticipated. Emily dressed carefully, trying to balance casual comfort with a subtle elegance she knew she would need in Victor's presence. Max sat patiently by the door, tail wagging, as she fastened his little leash. As they approached the park, she felt the familiar nervous flutter in her stomach. The streets were quieter in the evening, yet Emily's mind kept replaying lunch scenes, Victor's gaze, and the subtle yet commanding aura he exuded. Victor was waiting at the park entrance, his dark coat brushing against his tailored trousers, hands casually in pockets. He greeted them with a faint, polite nod, and Max immediately recognized him, bounding forward happily. Emily watched the interaction, amused and slightly touched by the way Victor knelt to scratch behind Max's ears. There was something strangely human about the moment. Behind the fearsome reputation, there was genuine care for a small dog that had caused so much chaos. They walked together along the winding paths of the park, the city lights creating a soft glow around them. The conversation started cautiously, Emily testing the waters, asking about the penthouse, the lunch, even venturing into Victor's hobbies and interests. He responded with a calm, measured ease, never revealing too much, yet giving just enough to keep her intrigued. She found herself laughing at subtle jokes, caught off guard by the softness in his tone, and slowly, the tension from their earlier encounter eased. Victor's presence, however, was impossible to ignore. There was a certain magnetism, an underlying dominance that made her aware of him with every step. Yet, it wasn't overbearing, it was captivating, like a dangerous current she was drawn toward despite knowing she should resist. Emily found herself looking at him more often than at Max, captivated by the combination of charm, authority, and mystery he carried effortlessly. As they approached a secluded bench by the fountain, Victor finally broke the casual conversation. Emily, he said quietly, almost hesitant, I know lunch yesterday was unusual. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming. Emily shook her head, a small smile forming. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. I didn't expect it, but I'm glad it happened. She noticed a subtle change in his expression, a slight softening of his otherwise controlled demeanor. Victor's gaze lingered on hers for a moment, and she felt an unexpected warmth. Good, he said, finally allowing a faint, genuine smile. You'll find that in my world, things are rarely ordinary. But perhaps, sometimes, ordinary moments are the most meaningful. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine, the combination of his words and his gaze leaving her unusually vulnerable yet intrigued. She realized that this was more than curiosity, she was drawn to him, to the contrast between danger and care, authority and unexpected warmth. Max barked, breaking the intensity, and both laughed lightly, the tension diffusing slightly but leaving an underlying current that neither of them ignored. As the evening deepened, they walked further into the park, the city lights sparkling around them, and Emily couldn't help but think about the strange twist her life had taken. A simple chase for a lost dog had led her into a world she had never imagined, luxury, danger, intrigue, and now, the beginning of an unexpected connection with Victor Romano. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain, Max had not only brought her to Victor's world but had also opened the door to something extraordinary, something she couldn't yet define but already felt deeply drawn to. By the time they returned to the street outside her apartment, Emily felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. She had survived lunch, navigated a walk with a man whose reputation preceded him, and now faced the intoxicating pull of curiosity and attraction. Victor's final words lingered in her mind as he handed her Max's leash with a faint smirk. Tomorrow, perhaps we'll discover more about each other. Emily watched him walk away, the shadows of the city enveloping him, and realized that her ordinary life had shifted irreversibly. A lost dog had led her to a penthouse, a lunch had introduced her to a world of power and intrigue, and a simple evening walk had revealed the first hints of a connection she could neither explain nor resist. Clutching Max close, she whispered softly, this is just the beginning, isn't it? And deep inside, she already knew the answer. Emily's heart was still fluttering from the walk with Victor, but she couldn't shake the lingering curiosity about his world, the penthouse, the lunch, and the subtle power that seemed to hum around him like an invisible current. Max curled up at her feet as she entered her apartment, tired from the adventure but perfectly content, and Emily sank into her chair, her thoughts a whirlwind. She had tried to focus on her work, yet Victor's dark gaze and the soft, almost imperceptible smile haunted her. There was something magnetic about him, something that drew her in despite her better judgment. She told herself to stay cautious, after all, this was a man whose reputation suggested danger, yet somehow, she couldn't resist the pull. Just as she was about to open her laptop, the doorbell rang, startling her. Max jumped up, barking loudly. Emily glanced at the clock, it was late in the evening, and she hadn't expected anyone. Her pulse quickened as she cautiously approached the door. When she opened it, Victor stood there, coat slightly damp from the evening air, his eyes scanning her with that familiar mix of intensity and curiosity. I hope I'm not intruding, he said smoothly, stepping inside before she could protest. I couldn't stop thinking about our walk, and Max. Emily swallowed nervously. Victor, what are you doing here? She asked, trying to sound calm but failing miserably. I promised we'd discover more about each other, he said, a hint of a smirk tugging at his lips. Consider this, an early continuation. He let his gaze linger on her, assessing, weighing, and Emily felt her heart race uncontrollably. There was something commanding about the way he moved, something that made the room feel smaller, more intimate, and somehow dangerous. Victor crouched down to Max, letting the little terrier sniff his hand before he looked back at Emily. You handled yourself well at lunch, he said softly, yet there was a note of admiration in his voice that made her cheeks warm. You navigate situations better than most would with my family. Emily felt a mix of pride and embarrassment. I just tried to keep Max safe, she murmured, glancing away briefly. The warmth in Victor's gaze made her uneasy yet curious. She wondered how someone so powerful could care about something so small, yet here he was, showing subtle tenderness in a world she assumed was all control and authority. Victor stood, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead, and walked closer. I have to be honest, he admitted quietly, his eyes locking onto hers. You intrigue me. Most people would have panicked, or worse, tried to run. You didn't. His words sent a shiver down her spine. Emily wanted to speak but found herself momentarily lost for words. She felt the magnetic pull of his presence, the subtle tension that seemed to charge the very air between them. The silence stretched, thick and charged, until Max's sudden yip broke it. He jumped between them, sensing the tension, nudging Emily with his tiny head. She laughed softly, grateful for the interruption, and bent down to scratch him behind the ears. Victor's eyes followed her movements, his smirk softening, yet there was an undeniable intensity in his gaze that made her pulse quicken. You know, he said casually, though his tone hinted at something deeper, most people underestimate how powerful a small dog can be. He seems harmless, but he has a knack for leading people to unexpected places. Emily looked up at him, her laugh trailing into a small sigh. I guess that makes Max a little hero in this story, she replied lightly, though inside she felt the weight of the moment. Victor chuckled quietly, stepping closer again. Perhaps, but sometimes, heroes find themselves in trouble. His words carried a subtle warning, yet the softness in his eyes betrayed genuine concern. Emily felt her heart tighten. She realized that this was more than curiosity, more than fascination. She was drawn to him in ways she didn't fully understand, and part of her wanted to resist, to step back, yet another part craved the thrill of his presence. Before she could respond, the sharp ring of her phone cut through the tension. Emily's fingers trembled as she answered. Hello, she said, voice slightly shaky. A familiar, yet alarming voice spoke on the other end, a distant acquaintance of Victor's, someone Emily had never met but whose tone carried immediate urgency. Ms. Carter, this is important. There's a situation with Victor. You need to be careful. Meet me outside, now. The line went dead before Emily could ask questions. Her pulse raced, fear mingling with confusion. Victor's eyes narrowed as he noticed her sudden pallor. What is it? He asked sharply, his authoritative tone cutting through the room. Emily hesitated, debating whether to tell him immediately, but she knew he would sense her unease regardless. Someone called. They said there's a problem, with you-know-who, she stammered. Victor's expression hardened, and he moved with a sudden swiftness that took Emily by surprise. Stay here, he commanded, his voice low but firm. I'll handle it. He stepped toward the door, and Emily's instincts screamed at her to follow, yet he stopped her with a subtle gesture. Trust me, he said simply, then disappeared into the night, leaving her trembling with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Emily paced, Max whining softly at her side, her thoughts spinning. She wondered what kind of trouble Victor had stepped into, what dangers lurked behind his calm, commanding exterior. And yet, even amidst the fear, she couldn't deny the thrill that ran through her veins. There was a dangerous allure to Victor, a complexity she couldn't ignore, and the way he had entrusted her, even briefly, with a sense of his world made her feel both empowered and terrified. Finally, the door opened, and Victor returned, his expression unreadable yet controlled. It's handled, he said simply, though Emily could detect the tension still lingering beneath the surface. He glanced at her, eyes softening ever so slightly. You should be careful. My world isn't safe. But you handled yourself well tonight. Emily felt a mixture of relief and pride. She smiled, a little shakily. Thank you for trusting me, she whispered. Victor's faint smirk returned, though his eyes remained intense. It's not trust, he said quietly. It's observation. And I've noticed, you're far stronger than you realize. The words settled over her, leaving her heart racing, not just from adrenaline but from the unspoken connection growing between them. Max barked happily, leaping into her lap, and the moment broke, the tension melting into a strange calm. Emily realized that her life had changed irreversibly, chasing a lost dog had thrown her into a world of intrigue, danger, and unexpected connection. As Victor left again, the shadows of the city enveloping him, Emily held Max close and whispered, "What am I getting myself into?" Yet deep down, she already knew the answer, a world she never imagined, filled with danger, charm, and the undeniable pull of a man who was anything but ordinary. Emily woke the next morning with a lingering sense of unease, her mind replaying the previous evening's events. Victor's sudden departure, the urgent call she had received, and the subtle warning all mingled into a restless tension she couldn't shake. Max lay sprawled across her bed, stretching lazily, oblivious to the human complexities that surrounded him. Emily sighed, rubbing her temples, trying to piece together fragments of a world she had only begun to glimpse. Her life had been ordinary until a mischievous little dog had led her into Victor Romano's orbit, and now ordinary seemed impossible. By mid-morning, Emily found herself compelled to check her phone. A message from Victor appeared: "Meet me at the cafe near the park at 2 p.m. There's something you need to see." Her heart raced, curiosity mixing with apprehension. She dressed quickly, Max trotting alongside her, and arrived at the cafe, a quaint place that contrasted sharply with the grandeur and danger of Victor's world. Victor was already there, seated at a corner table, his dark coat hanging casually from the chair, eyes scanning the surroundings with a calculated intensity that made Emily instinctively quiet. "Emily," he said as she approached, voice calm but authoritative. "I wanted to show you something important about my world." He gestured for her to sit, and she did, trying to mask her nervousness. Max settled at her feet, sensing the tension in the air. Victor leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There are people in my life, situations that are complicated. Yesterday's call wasn't just a random warning. There are those who would use you as leverage if they knew you were involved." Emily's stomach tightened. "Leverage? Me?" she whispered, her mind spinning. She had known Victor's reputation, of course, but she hadn't imagined the real dangers of being close to him. I don't understand. Why me?" Victor's eyes softened slightly, but his tone remained firm. "Because you care about Max. That small act of concern has placed you in the line of sight of people who never miss a detail. But it also shows me something important: your courage, your instinct, and your potential." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Emily struggled to respond, caught between fear and an inexplicable pull toward him. "Potential," she repeated softly, unsure if she understood. Victor leaned back, his gaze distant yet focused, as if calculating the next steps in a complex game. "Yes. You've shown resilience, quick thinking, and a natural empathy that, well, it's rare in people who stumble into my world by accident." His words made her cheeks flush, a strange mixture of pride and nervousness bubbling inside her. As they spoke, Emily began to realize that Victor's world was far more intricate than she had imagined. The luxurious penthouse, the seemingly perfect family lunches, even the subtle interactions at the park, all of it existed in a delicate balance of power, influence, and strategy. And somehow, she had become part of that balance. She glanced at him, sensing the underlying care that contrasted sharply with the danger his reputation suggested. It was both thrilling and terrifying. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a small envelope delivered by a discreet courier. Victor's expression darkened slightly as he opened it, scanning the contents quickly. Emily noticed a photograph, several documents, and a folded note. He studied them briefly, then looked at her with a faint, wry smile. "Seems like trouble has a way of finding us," he murmured. "And sometimes, it finds you first." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. "Trouble? What kind of trouble?" she asked cautiously. Victor's eyes met hers, calm yet intense. "People who underestimate the wrong things. They think the world is simple, but it's not. And now, because of Max, because of your curiosity and your courage, you're part of it." Despite the gravity of his words, there was an undeniable charm in the way he spoke. Emily found herself leaning in, drawn to him, captivated by the contrast between danger and reassurance in his presence. She realized that her fascination with him went beyond mere curiosity, it was magnetic, almost irresistible. Victor leaned closer, lowering his voice even further. "I can't keep you completely safe if you remain in my world, Emily. But I can teach you how to navigate it, how to survive, and maybe even thrive." The intensity of his gaze made her pulse quicken. She felt the weight of his words, the unspoken promise of protection and partnership, and the thrill of stepping into a world she had only glimpsed. For a moment, Emily considered refusing, retreating to the safety of her ordinary life. But the thought felt hollow. Max, the reason she had entered this world, nudged her hand, grounding her. And deep down, she realized she was already too involved, already captivated by Victor, already intrigued by the dangerous allure of his life. All right, she said finally, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. I'll learn, but I need to understand everything first. I can't just stumble blindly. Victor's faint smile returned, approving yet serious. Good. You'll need courage, observation, and instinct. All three will be tested in ways you haven't yet imagined. They spent the next hour going through basic details, people to be aware of, subtle rules of conduct, and the delicate balance of trust and caution in Victor's world. Emily absorbed as much as she could, her mind spinning with the complexity of it all. And yet, amid the seriousness, there were moments of levity, Max chasing a napkin that had fallen to the floor, Victor's rare, subtle humor breaking the tension, and small, fleeting touches that sent unexpected warmth through Emily's chest. By the time the meeting ended, Emily felt exhausted but exhilarated. She had glimpsed the depth of Victor's world, understood the dangers lurking beneath the surface, and felt an undeniable pull toward the man himself. As they stepped outside, the city lights shimmered around them, painting the streets in golden hues. Victor handed her a folded note, instructions for the coming days. Follow this carefully, he said softly. And remember, trust your instincts. Emily nodded, tucking the note safely into her bag. Max yipped, seemingly sensing her emotions, and she smiled, feeling a mixture of fear, excitement, and anticipation. As Victor walked away, the shadows of the city swallowing him, she realized how irrevocably her life had changed. A lost dog had thrown her into a world of intrigue, danger, and unexpected connections. And now, with each step she took, Emily felt the thrill and peril of a life she never could have imagined, one that promised challenges, surprises, and a deepening connection with Victor Romano that neither of them could deny. The following days passed in a strange blend of ordinary routines and extraordinary encounters. Emily tried to focus on her work, yet her thoughts continually drifted back to Victor, to the penthouse, and to the dangerous, thrilling world he inhabited. Max, of course, remained blissfully unaware of the intricate web of intrigue he had led his owner into, happily chasing squirrels and wagging his tail as though the world held nothing but playful adventures. Yet Emily felt the subtle tension beneath the surface of each interaction with Victor, an invisible current that promised both excitement and peril. One evening, Victor called her unexpectedly. Meet me at the docks, he said, his voice calm yet carrying that unmistakable authority. There's something I need to show you. Emily's stomach tightened. The docks were known for being secluded, a place where deals and confrontations often took place far from the city's bustling streets. She glanced at Max, who tilted his head, sensing her unease. It's fine, she whispered, though her voice betrayed her anxiety. We'll be careful. When they arrived, Victor led her to a quiet corner where a sleek black car was waiting. Get in, he instructed, and she hesitated only briefly before stepping inside. The air inside the car smelled faintly of leather and cologne, and the silence between them was thick with unspoken tension. Victor's hands rested on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead, but his presence was overwhelming, commanding every thought she had. Emily felt a mixture of apprehension and anticipation, aware that every moment in his company carried a dangerous edge she couldn't ignore. They drove in silence for several minutes until they arrived at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Emily's pulse quickened. Victor, why are we here? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. His eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something unreadable, concern, perhaps, or a test. You need to see this, he said quietly. It's part of understanding the world you've stepped into. Inside the warehouse, shadows stretched across the walls, and Emily could feel the weight of the space pressing in. Victor led her to a corner where several crates had been stacked neatly. He opened one, revealing documents, photographs, and encrypted data drives. This is the type of work I deal with daily, he explained. Intelligence, strategy, threats, and people who would do anything to gain leverage. You're lucky Max led you to me when he did. Not everyone survives in my world unscathed. Emily's mind raced. The complexity, the danger, the sheer magnitude of Victor's operations, it was overwhelming. Yet she couldn't look away, couldn't stop listening. Each word he spoke, each movement he made, carried an intensity that made her acutely aware of him. The subtle shift of his shoulders, the way his dark eyes measured every detail, the quiet strength in his voice, it all combined to create a magnetic pull she had no desire to resist. As they examined the documents, Victor's hand brushed against hers. It was accidental, yet the touch sent a jolt through her, making her heart skip a beat. He didn't comment, didn't flinch, he simply continued with the task at hand. Emily, however, couldn't ignore the electricity that seemed to pass between them. Every glance, every motion, heightened the tension that had been building since their first encounter. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the warehouse, metal scraping against concrete. Victor's body tensed instantly, his hand moving subtly toward a concealed weapon at his side. "Stay behind me," he whispered, his voice low but commanding. Emily obeyed, her heart hammering in her chest. The shadows shifted, and a figure emerged, hesitant but clearly observing them. Victor's gaze never wavered, eyes calculating, assessing the threat. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice steady yet threatening. The figure stepped forward, revealing themselves to be a courier from one of Victor's contacts, a warning, not an attack. "Mr. Romano," the courier said nervously, "someone's been asking questions about her. About the woman with Max." Victor's expression darkened. "And what did you tell them?" he asked sharply. The courier shook their head, fear evident in their eyes. "Nothing. I just wanted to warn you. They know she exists." Emily's stomach dropped. Her presence, her curiosity, her connection to Max, she had unknowingly entered a world where even small details could be dangerous. Victor's gaze softened briefly when it met hers, a fleeting moment of reassurance. "You're not in immediate danger," he said quietly, "but you need to understand, my world doesn't forgive mistakes. And being connected to me, being connected to Max, it paints a target on your back." Her pulse raced, yet despite the fear, she felt a strange thrill. She was terrified, but there was also a pull she couldn't resist, the magnetic allure of Victor, the danger of the unknown, the seductive thrill of stepping into a life far removed from ordinary concerns. "I understand," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I'll be careful." Victor studied her for a long moment, the intensity in his gaze making her feel exposed, yet strangely protected. "You've handled more than most could," he admitted, a faint edge of admiration in his tone. "And that's why I brought you here. To show you the stakes. To prepare you for what might come next." Emily nodded, absorbing the gravity of his words. She realized that her ordinary life had ended the moment Max escaped into Victor's penthouse, and each step forward now carried both danger and possibility. After ensuring the courier left safely, Victor led Emily back to the car. The drive home was silent but charged, the tension between them palpable. Emily stole glances at him, noticing subtle details, the curve of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes, the way he handled every situation with a mix of authority and controlled emotion. It was intoxicating, and she felt a pull she couldn't resist. When they arrived at her apartment, Victor stepped out first, holding the door open. "Remember," he said softly, "stay aware. Trust your instincts. And, remember what you've learned today." Emily nodded, holding Max close. As he walked away, the shadows swallowing him once more, she felt an overwhelming mixture of fear, excitement, and anticipation. Her life had shifted irreversibly. A lost dog had led her into a world of power, danger, and intrigue, and now, each moment promised both risk and an undeniable connection with Victor Romano that neither of them could deny. As Emily closed the door behind her, she whispered to Max, "This is getting more dangerous, but I can't stop now." Max wagged his tail, sensing her determination, and Emily knew that whatever lay ahead, she was ready, or at least, she hoped she was. The shadows of Victor's world were vast and complicated, but within them, a spark had ignited, a connection that neither fear nor danger could easily extinguish. Emily woke to the soft light of dawn streaming through her apartment window. Max curled at her feet as usual, yet she felt an unusual tension in her chest. The past few days had been a whirlwind of unexpected encounters, danger, and a magnetic pull toward Victor Romano that she could neither ignore nor fully understand. Today, she sensed, would mark a turning point, one that would test her courage, instincts, and the fragile connection she had begun to form with a man whose world balanced danger and charm in equal measure. Her phone buzzed, a message from Victor: "Meet me at the penthouse. There's something you need to see, something that can't wait." Emily felt a flutter of apprehension and anticipation. She dressed carefully, choosing something that felt casual yet presentable, and Max bounded ahead, sensing the urgency in her movements. The taxi ride was quiet, her mind racing with possibilities. Had the courier's warning escalated? Was someone truly after her, or was Victor testing her ability to handle the pressures of his world? By the time they arrived, the penthouse loomed above her like a gleaming fortress, a symbol of the power and intrigue she had slowly become part of. Victor was waiting in the lobby, dark coat brushing his shoulders, eyes sharp yet calm. As they ascended to the penthouse, Emily noticed the subtle shift in the air, the quiet hum of tension mingling with expectation. Victor opened the door for her, and she stepped inside, immediately sensing a difference. The usually elegant and controlled environment now carried a charge, a subtle anticipation that made her pulse quicken. Max darted forward, tail wagging, and Victor gave him a brief scratch behind the ears before turning his attention to Emily. "There's a situation," he began, voice low and precise. "Someone has crossed a line. And it's personal." Emily's stomach tightened. She knew from past encounters that Victor's world was never straightforward. The complexity, danger, and subtle threats were always layered beneath the surface. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. Victor moved toward the expansive window, his gaze fixed on the city below. "You've seen glimpses of what I deal with," he said. "Today, you'll see the stakes fully. But you'll also see why we," he hesitated, the rare vulnerability flickering in his eyes. Emily's heart skipped. She felt the pull of unspoken words, a magnetic tension that was both thrilling and terrifying. Suddenly, a soft chime echoed from the security system, and Victor's expression hardened. He gestured for Emily to stay back as he moved to a control panel, assessing the alert. "It's them," he muttered under his breath. "They know." Emily's eyes widened. "Who?" she asked. Victor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved with the precision and authority she had come to recognize, checking cameras, doors, and the perimeter. The tension was palpable, and yet, in that charged moment, Emily realized she trusted him completely, even with her own safety in his hands. Victor finally turned to her, expression a mixture of calm control and faint concern. "They're coming for information," he said quietly. "And you, being connected to me, makes you a target." Emily's pulse raced, fear mingling with adrenaline. She clutched Max tightly, whispering softly to calm both herself and him. "What do we do?" she asked. Victor stepped closer, the magnetic intensity of his presence overwhelming yet comforting. "We face it together," he said. "But you must stay calm, observant, and trust me." Emily nodded, feeling a surge of determination. She had come this far, survived the lunch, the park walk, the warehouse, and now she would stand with him, confronting the challenges head-on. Minutes later, the intruders arrived, subtle yet deliberate, moving with calculated precision. Victor guided Emily to a safe vantage point, giving her instructions in quiet, urgent whispers. "Stay here, observe their movements, and be ready. Don't intervene unless I say." Emily's heart pounded, yet she obeyed, following his guidance with meticulous attention. The intruders were skilled, but Victor's anticipation, strategy, and control made the encounter almost choreographed. The tension escalated as Victor confronted the intruders directly, his voice calm but commanding. Emily watched, breath held, as the exchange unfolded. Every movement, every glance, every subtle decision demonstrated his mastery, his ability to navigate danger while maintaining authority. And yet, amid the peril, there was a moment when Victor's eyes found hers, a fleeting connection that sent a shiver through her. It was a silent reassurance, a promise that he would protect her, and perhaps more importantly, that he trusted her presence and judgment. The confrontation ended swiftly, the intruders retreating with a mixture of caution and recognition of Victor's power. Emily exhaled, tension leaving her body in waves. Victor approached her, dark eyes softening as he studied her. "You did well," he said quietly, voice carrying both approval and something more, an unspoken acknowledgement of her courage and resilience. Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of pride, relief, and something deeper. Max barked happily, breaking the intensity, and Victor's faint smile returned. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face, the contact brief yet charged with meaning. "You're remarkable," he murmured, and Emily felt her pulse quicken. The danger had passed, but the connection between them was undeniable, electric, and impossible to ignore. As the evening settled into a calm, Victor guided Emily to the balcony, the city lights sparkling beneath them. The adrenaline faded, replaced by an intimate silence. Victor's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Emily looked up at him, eyes wide, heart racing, and saw not just the formidable Mafia boss, but a man capable of tenderness, care, and unexpected vulnerability. "You've changed my world," Victor said quietly, voice low and steady. "Not just because of Max, but because of you, your courage, your honesty, your instincts. You've proven yourself in ways I didn't anticipate." Emily's breath caught. She realized that despite the danger, despite the intrigue, despite the uncertainty, she had found a place, an unexpected connection that grounded her amidst chaos. For a long moment, neither spoke. The city hummed below, the night carrying both mystery and calm. Then, Victor leaned slightly, and Emily instinctively met him halfway. Their lips met in a gentle, tentative kiss, a culmination of tension, attraction, and mutual respect. It was brief, yet powerful, sealing the unspoken bond that had developed over days of unusual encounters, shared danger, and unexpected intimacy. Pulling back slightly, Victor rested his forehead against hers. "This isn't the end," he murmured. "There's still danger, still intrigue. But we face it together." Emily nodded, feeling a surge of determination and trust. Max barked softly, tail wagging, a perfect punctuation to the moment. They had survived lunch, walks, warnings, and threats, and now, they had discovered something neither had expected, a bond forged in danger, curiosity, and unexpected attraction. As the night deepened, Emily realized that her life had transformed irreversibly. A lost dog had led her to a penthouse, a mafia boss, and a world of intrigue and danger. She had faced tests, witnessed peril, and felt the thrill of living on the edge. And now, with Victor by her side, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was ready. The ordinary world she had once known no longer mattered. What mattered was the connection, the adventure, and the undeniable spark that had ignited between her and Victor Romano, an attraction as dangerous as it was irresistible, and a life that promised both peril and passion. Max barked once more, nudging Emily's hand, and she laughed softly, feeling the warmth of the moment. Victor smiled, eyes reflecting both admiration and something deeper. The night stretched before them, filled with possibilities, challenges, and the thrilling promise of a story that was only just beginning. Emily knew one thing for certain: she had found her place in Victor's world, and she wouldn't trade the adventure, the danger, or the connection for anything.